Hello and welcome back to the O'Day and Night podcast. I'm your host, Hemi Neutron, aka Adam O'Day. Back here with CFE Grind, the encyclopedia, Connor Hibbett.
Happy to be here today. Thank you for
Oh
having me.
yeah, leader of the Maniacs. And today we're going to be discussing just the overall preview of college football. So breakthrough teams, breakthrough players, and just overall who's going to be good. So, yeah.
So why not discuss the American Athletic Conference, which is the conference that we reside now? I think that's great. That is just such a huge step up for us, and it's not just the name, the American,
Right.
which yes, that helps the brand obviously, but you look at the exposure, the TV deals, the marketing situation, and what it could mean down the line for us with recruiting, income, the money. It's everything is just going to be a better look for us.
Not necessarily our football student section, but
Yeah, hopefully that improves with the exposure with the American Athletic, but having that AAC brand and logo now with us is just incredible.
hopefully, like we said, our student section just continues to improve. At least for homecoming and family day, the student section was bare last year for football. So hopefully, people stay throughout.
Yeah, and we've had. It's a little bit disappointing to see the student body not be more consistent, regardless of the sport. You look at not just our basketball team, obviously, right? Our student section is improving for basketball, fan base. The alumni have been pretty good showing up at basketball for a little while now, but
Really, that's it.
yeah, and you would think with softball, soccer, the women's soccer team has 28 consecutive winning seasons.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize just how good that is. And you look at, for example, right, for football, you have 12 games. And so if you said like our football team's made a bowl game in 6 of the last 7 years, that's pretty good. Okay?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But imagine 28 consecutive winning seasons for the women's soccer team. That's crazy. And then the softball team has been electric these last several years in Conference USA, and then again we're stepping up in competition this year.
Yeah.
But you just look at all the success that all the teams have had, and yet the overall consistency of the student body with the atmosphere at the games, you would like to see it be better than what it is right now.
Right. And I went to a few late season softball games last year, and I think there was only one or two other students there, like at least in the stands, in the bleachers. There's a decent amount of people out in right field just tailgating, but just you gotta have people like in the stands and at the games, like three, at least for softball, three straight prior to this past season, 3 straight conference championships, and then going to the conference tournament championship again this year, losing by 1 run. We gotta have some more support for that.
Yeah.
A little off topic there, just ranting about all our fan bases, but
But yeah, it's this is a really big moment for UNT sports, and potentially for the student body as well. Oh, it will be for the student body, but I should say potentially for the fan base, and hopefully the improvement with the atmospheres of the respective different sports.
New head coach for both basketball teams, and for our main topic specifically, football, Eric Morris coming in from Texas Tech and Washington State.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that when he was at Texas Tech and Washington State, at the different times he was there, he had offensive lines that struggled. He's got his best offensive line that he's had in the first year with a coaching staff, obviously now as a head coach, rather than just an OC. But yeah, UNT's offensive line has been one of the best in the G5, in the entire G5 the last couple of years.
Right.
We've been amazing up front.
Arguably, just regardless of Group of 5, Power 5, top 20 in the nation.
That's right, and I say we've been arguably the best G5 offensive line, and then one of the best offensive lines in the entire country. The pressure rate that we allowed last year was in the top 10 in least amount. So that was insane. like top 10 in the country. We're not talking top 10 in the conference,
Yeah.
top 10 in the G5. No, 131 FBS schools last year in the statistic. Now there's 133 FBS schools. So yeah, we've been really good up front, and we've got 2 offensive guards who could be first, maybe second team All American Athletic Conference this year. We do have some new pieces up front, specifically on the offensive tackles.
New
So-
QB1. Don't have a 30-year-old quarterback anymore, so I'm
Right.
happy about that.
Yeah, and as from what I've heard, you want a little bit of inside information. I think we're going to see 3 quarterbacks, but I think it's going to really be down to 2.
Yeah.
But we're going to see. I think, giving my take on it, I think we're going to see Chandler and then Jace Reuter be the 2 guys that see the most snaps in the non-conference.
Right.
And I think the quarterback decision will ultimately be made for who's QB1 by the end of September, maybe by mid-September, maybe. But I think it'll be decided in the non-conference. I don't think it's going to be decided going into the Cal game. I don't think it's going to be decided after the Cal game. I think it's going to take a few games. So I'm looking forward to seeing who turns out to be the guy. And Jace Reuter, I think he's been a little bit overlooked. This was a guy that came out of high school as one of the top guys in the state. So he's had some injuries through the years. He originally was at North Carolina, and he was we're talking back in 2017. This guy's been in college football for a while now.
Oh man.
He's married, and his wife is expecting a baby here in a few months. So.
Yeah. Hopefully
really
after
nice
the
family.
season.
Yeah, they have a really nice family, and so
I mean, if he does end up being the guy, I personally think Rodgers is going to find the field, regardless of what position.
yeah, he's a really good athlete. So I'm looking forward to seeing Rodgers. He's been tabbed as Morris's guy, right? Coming in from the portal from ULM. He's got experience. So does Reuter. So I am looking forward to seeing what happens there. Offensive line, I like the interior. We'll see with the offensive tackles, but we've been really good up front for a couple years now. It's a high bar to clear to be as good as last year, so I'm not expecting that. But
and new O-line coach as well.
Exactly. So yeah, you have some new guys in the coaching staff. Obviously, a first-year head coach as well. So that'll be interesting to see how that pans out. We're playing against a Cal defense who. They've struggled. They've struggled the last couple of years, kind of fallen off the map. But Justin Wilcox, their head coach, usually gets the most out of his defense, and they've got a couple of guys to the portal. Cal did a sneaky job in the portal this offseason.
Including former UNT tight end Asher Alberding.
Yes, and then they got the guy from TCU, quarterback Jackson. You want a little bit insight into him. He had struggled with turnovers in the spring for Cal. He's a great athlete. You're going to see him run the football. He's probably going to be the starting quarterback for Cal. He and Jaden Ott at running back, they're going to be running the read option a lot. So, again, you're going to see Jackson running the ball a lot against UNT. And remember, we could have been better against running quarterbacks last year. We struggled in the bowl game. And we're going to be facing a team that's going to have a similar ratio from run to pass that Boise State showed us in the bowl game. Right. So, Jackson, though, struggled with turnovers. He's a little green, a little inexperienced, a great athlete, but because of his ability to run the ball, sometimes he can get a little careless protecting the football. So UNT's we got a new linebacking core, but one thing I want to see from them against Cal specifically, matchup to matchup here, is how they attack Jackson, because Jaden Ott, the running back for Cal, he's gonna stand out for UNT fans. You're gonna notice him right away. He's going into his second year as a collegiate football player, but he stood out as a freshman last year. He is definitely the best player for Cal's offense, and it's going to be Jaden Ott right and Jaden Ott left. But we got to watch out for Jackson. When Jackson runs the football, what I want to see is whoever is attempting to tackle Jackson, go for the football.
Yeah, attempting being the key word.
Yeah.
Lost a lot of our 2 leading tacklers from last year, so.
Yeah.
It'll be rough opening day.
It could be in the defensive line. Mason Richards is going to play defensive end in our new formation defensively, 3-3-5. So that'll be interesting. And speaking of the 3-3-5s, I want to talk about the defensive line in the 3-3-5. Last year, we were 127th in the country in defensive line yards. So basically, we got pushed around up front.
Yeah.
We allowed a lot of rushing yards, didn't get a ton of pressure, didn't really penetrate opposing teams' offensive lines. Mason Richards this year, he definitely stands out. He's a quality player for us. The problem is, like, last year we weren't statistically that great on defense, but we had some quality players.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one of our corners went into the portal, and not too long afterwards, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss picks him up.
Oh, yeah.
And then you look at a guy like Nixon, you know, our former linebacker. He goes to Auburn.
Yeah.
And he's going to be a quality player for Auburn. Auburn has some questions in their front seven. And then that's just on defense. And
You also had our best big play receiver go to Auburn.
yeah, Jair Shorter, a guy who averaged over 23 yards a catch.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't catch a ton of balls, but when
When he
when he was receiving a pass, it was a long one.
Yeah, and I want to say he had right around, or at least 50% of his catches were touchdowns.
Yes, that's correct. And he actually averaged the most yard, YAC or not. Well, he did have yards after the catch, but yards per reception was the biggest in the country, the largest margin in the country, and by quite a decent margin at that. So yeah, we lose some quality in the portal. Got a new quarterback, first-year coaching staff, a defense that wasn't that great statistically last year, despite having some quality players. I'm not saying that we lack quality. I'm sure someone's going to step up, but it's just it doesn't look great right now.
Right.
And you're moving up in competition. Fortunately for us this year, what's going to make a difference for us for our win total and hopefully get us into the postseason is our non-conference. These last few years in Conference USA, we've had some manageable games in conference, but a really difficult non-conference.
Right.
It's kind of flip-flopped this year. We've got a really difficult conference schedule, but then a mostly manageable non-conference. But you know what? I've seen a lot of people chalk up the road game against Louisiana Tech as an automatic win.
Yeah.
I do not think
yeah.
that. Yeah, I do. I think we... I'm interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see what that spread is. Vegas usually gives 2 to 3 points for the home team.
Yeah.
So Louisiana Tech, we're going to be playing at Louisiana Tech, so the Bulldogs will be the home team there. But I think that's going to be a more challenging game than most UNT fans anticipate.
Right. And I think our our floor for non-conference is 2-2.
Yes,
Those
I
two
agree.
L's, La Tech and Cal.
Yes.
In the opener.
And if our defense does improve despite losing some quality players in the portal, then I think we could be looking at a season in which we make a bowl game in our first year in the American.
Right.
Maybe even finish with a winning record if we could do well in the non-conference.
Yeah.
So things kind of hinge on Cal and Louisiana Tech for me.
Right.
If I'm making a record prediction right now, I'm going to say 6-6.
Okay.
Between Temple, maybe Navy, although I think Navy's going to be improved this year, and I think Temple will be as well. But
Yeah.
between those two in the conference and then non-conference at Louisiana Tech and then home against Cal, those 4 games will decide our floor and ceiling. But I'm going to say, hey, we've made a bowl game in 6 of the last 7 years. I know we're stepping up in competition, but as I mentioned earlier, the non-conference gets a little bit easier this year. So
Right.
I'm going to say we find a way to get to a bowl game. I think our offense can still be really effective. We got a really deep running back room. We go 5 deep there. We'll have 3 guys mainly carrying the most of the carries. Will go to 3 guys, but
Right. And I believe all 5 are, at the very least, a group of 5 starting caliber running backs.
yes, I totally agree. I think we've actually got one of the best running back rooms in the entire country.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot which running back it was. One of our running backs was top 5 last year in the G5 in yards
was
after
it
contact.
Ade?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He was.
Side note on him. So my younger brother plays at Harding University out in Arkansas. Ade spent his redshirt freshman year at Harding. So I just find that interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not gonna they call them slot backs, but it's effectively just your true running back they don't use the slot backs all that much. It's mostly just fullback dive or, QB keeper. But
Yeah.
the occasional pitch out to the slot back. But, which, I mean, you see why he wanted to transfer to a normal offense.
Right. Yeah.
But
And speaking of slot backs and whatnot, I guess we'll transition here into a different. So yeah, what's your prediction for UNT before we transition here?
6-6 as well. I believe 3 wins in non-conference, and wins over, at the very least, Navy and Temple in conference play. Navy, they're gonna give us a lot of trouble defensively since.
Yeah, I do think Navy's defense is going to be sneaky good this year.
Oh yeah,
from
and
a national standpoint.
yeah, and they run the ball a lot, which we weren't very good at stopping that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
and we play them on the road as well.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
yeah, which Annapolis is just kind of a destination
play it.
game for me.
And it'll be in the first half of the year, so yeah. We
Yeah.
can still be working out the kinks.
Oh yeah.
Navy's very high returning production. By the way, here's a little nugget on Navy. I guess we should transition to some of these other American teams here. Navy returns the most production it's ever returned in the returning production era. So Bill Connolly does his returning production numbers. He's been doing it for 10 years now. And Navy has never returned this much production, ever.
Wow.
The military academies, their numbers for everything are a little different.
Right.
They don't really get guys to the portal. They don't
Right.
recruit the same way that the other 129 teams do. So,
Unorthodox offenses for all 3 academies.
yes, and speaking of their offenses, last year I believe the NCAA made that rule change in regards to cut blocks. There's no more cut blocks, so no more blocks below the waist, which really hindered these triple option teams from their normal rushing attacks.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see. Navy has been, over the last few years, they've been doing less triple option, like pure triple option, than Army and Air Force have. And so I think you're going to continue to see Navy, Army, Air Force start to transition away from the triple option. I shouldn't say completely, right? But I think the ratio of triple option plays to non-triple option plays, I think you're going to see those margins come closer together and not have that wide discrepancy in their offensive numbers.
Right. And I mean, I've already seen it with Army. I watch a lot of their games, having my dad graduate from West Point, but
And
they've switched more to I want to call it a spread option type.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So that'll be interesting to see. I think Navy's got an outside chance to make a bowl game this year.
Oh yeah. I mean, hopefully they don't beat Army. A little biased there, but
so go Army beat Navy, huh? For you? Yeah.
Oh yeah, all day, every day.
So I'm going to give a bold take here. It would be bold for. I don't want to use a stereotypical term here, but how about for the college football casual? Who may not look into all the numbers all the time. They're not looking into the sports betting world. I think, yes, that's what I am, guys. I am a college football enthusiast, or I'm a nerd when it comes.
The politically correct term, the encyclopedia.
There you go. Yeah. CFE grinder right here. Okay, so UAB, I think, will finish with a losing record this year, and quite frankly, I think they could completely bottom out.
Oh, yeah.
So, Action Network does their own metric system, their own numbers on TARP. And basically what TARP stands for, T-A-R-P, it has to do with returning production, and it has to do with the talent of the returning production, and then the incoming transfers, and then the recruiting class. Well, of all these schools in the entire country, so FBS schools, we're looking at 133 here, UAB was last in TARP. And their returning production by itself is third to last in the entire country. So they have a lot of new players this year. Didn't really upgrade to the portal. A first-year coach in Trent Dilfer, and not just a first-year coach, it's going to be first-year coordinators as well. Get a load of this. Trent Dilfer and most of the staff have never even coached at the college level. And so I don't care what coaching staff would be assembling that roster. They would have an uphill battle.
Oh, yeah.
This coaching staff, who has never done it before, I'm personally going to fade UAB this year. Now, UAB is going to play North Carolina A&T in the first game of the season. Now, normally, North Carolina A&T, they're good.
Yeah.
But this year, they're a little bit in a rebuild. You get an FBS team in a rebuild and an FCS team in a rebuild. So I'm going to, and the UAB's playing at home. They have a new stadium, or I think the new stadium came out last year, but
new uniforms too that just dropped yesterday.
They have new uniforms. It's interesting how FIU, UAB came out with new uniforms. If I'm not mistaken, those are going to be some of the worst teams in the country this year.
Yeah.
So yeah, they have to get exposure somehow.
Yeah. Florida International, the airport.
So they may have been the airport. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not exactly. I'm not exactly going to take that airplane this year with Florida International. I don't think they're going to be really traveling anywhere in the postseason. I'll put it that way. And neither will UAB. I've seen a lot of projections.
Who? AB?
Who AB? Right. SM Who and Who AB.
Yes.
Yeah. And we can figure out a nickname for UTSA as well. You put a couple letters at the end and then a letter at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'll
let y'all.
Yeah.
I'll let y'all do the math, Mr. Viewer and Miss Viewer. But
if you're good at Wheel of Fortune, I'll give you a hint. Those are 3 consonants we're looking at for that. So I don't think UAB will make a bowl game. I've seen a lot of projections have UAB at 6-6, 7-5. So it's not like a ton of people are high on them.
Right.
But I'm telling you guys, they're not making a bowl game.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even think they're going to get to 5 wins. Believe it or not, the market, sports betting world. So what do the actual experts think about this? We're talking about the people who don't lose, right? We're talking about the actual betting world, the market. They don't lose. So what do they have UAB at right now? Well, when the market when their win totals first opened up, they had UAB at around 6. It quickly went down to 5.5. Now it's at 5, and there are some sports books with 4.5.
Right.
So clearly the market is projecting regression here,
Right.
and I think regression is coming too. And I think right now you can actually get UAB under 4.5 at plus money. So if you're into betting, I think that's a good bet.
Right.
You can also get them at under 5. It's minus money, so it's shaded to the under.
Yep.
So again, the market is predicting regression here. So believe it or not, I said bold for the college football casuals, right? There is a reason why I tabbed it as for the casual take, because they should finish with a losing record. My record prediction for UAB is 3-9. I could see 2-10 as well.
Oh yeah, and keep in mind their running back from last year was, I want to say, top 5 in the nation.
Yeah, and yards after contact as well. Like in every stat.
Everything, yeah.
Dwayne McBride was special last year. Now, they got a decent running back this year in Jermaine Brown. The problem, there's 2 issues with the running game. Well, actually 3. Okay, so for one, first and foremost, Jermaine Brown, he's not even 6 foot. He's like 5'9", less than 200 pounds.
Oh yeah. Like if you're gonna be that short, like get some beef on you, you know?
Yeah, I mean he's got some decent beef. He's like 185, 190, but I mean
Shoot, that's my size, give or take. And like, I mean, I lift weights. I think I look kind of big, but like, for Division I FBS football, like it's way too small.
Yeah, he's now listed at 195, so he's gained a few pounds. But this guy, he's not a Dwayne McBride. He can't exactly carry the load, carry the rock 25 times, 30 times in a game.
Right.
Here's 2 other issues for UAB, at least with the running game. For one, I list Jermaine Brown's height and weight for one, and then the second one, their offensive line returns the least amount of experience in the entire country. You're looking at a group that has to replace all 5 starters, the only offensive line in the country that has to replace all 5 starters, but they only return 14% of their offensive line starts from last year. So you look across the depth chart, they just lose a ton of depth. And
Speaking of which, a picture of the O-line just popped up on his laptop.
yeah. So I significantly downgrade this offensive line. You look at UAB's running backs last few years. You know why they've been successful with running backs in the running game? That offensive line's been really good in the Bill Clark era.
Oh, yeah.
I think the only year that they weren't that great was 2019, and yet they still played for a conference championship that year, thanks to their schedule. That's another topic for another day.
Yeah. Like us last year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, this offensive line is going to regress. It's going to take multiple steps back. They didn't really, like I mentioned, the TARP for UAB is the worst in the country. They didn't really upgrade in the portal. So that offensive line is going to be an issue this year. And then the third thing, they're not even looking to run the ball as much this year. So, Trent Dilfer's coming in. They're looking to pass the ball a lot more. The receiver room for UAB is probably the most proven group from a depth standpoint. They don't really have any dudes there. They lose that Trey Shropshire guy, who was by far their top receiver last year. Wasn't even close. But they have some experienced guys who probably will go, for 400, 500 yards receiving, maybe 5 or 6 touchdowns. But they don't really have, at least in my opinion, they don't really have any guy that's going, at least in terms of quality from an individual standpoint, that's going to really break out on tape. They might, by volume, because they're going to be passing the ball more this year, they might have some guys who collect some decent stats, but they just don't blow you away.
Right.
Another issue, again, that offensive line, that pass blocking, they're not even going to be running the football as much this year, so the rushing numbers are going to really fall off the map.
Right.
Jacob Zeno is going to be the starting quarterback for the Blazers.
Yeah. Shoot, might as well put Trent Dilfer back out there.
Right? Oh my gosh. In Trent Dilfer, guys, so he won a Super Bowl, right? Honestly, he might be like the worst starting quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He never, ever, in his whole career, completed over 60% of his passes. And only in 3 of his years in the NFL did he pass for more touchdowns than interceptions.
Wow.
So it's not like he was that great of a starting quarterback in the NFL. Yes, he has a Super Bowl ring because he had the 2000 defense, the 2000 Baltimore Ravens defense. That's why, which is one of the best defenses ever in NFL history.
In all honesty, I forgot he was the starting quarterback for that team. Like I was just focused on Ray Lewis.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that defense was special. That they carried that team. So Jacob Zeno, formerly at Baylor. He's an okay athlete. He's a decent athlete, but I don't think he's that great of a quarterback. And again, the issues up front, it's not going to help him. Receiving core it's okay. So I don't see anything special with this UAB team. They've got one of the more difficult schedules in the entire AAC this year. They've got a difficult non-conference too, by the way. They got to face 2 quality Georgia teams, the defending national champion Bulldogs, and then a team who I think could be sneaky good this year in Georgia Southern. They did much better in TARP in the transfer portal and their returning production. I'll get to Georgia Southern here in a second, but they got to face them on the road as well. Yep, I think UAB is going to bottom out this year. The defense for UAB has been pretty good the last few years. It's going to fall off the map as well this year. So the market is looking at significant regression here, and so am I. I think I told some friends months ago I expected UAB to fall off the map this year, and now the market's projecting that too. If you are into sports betting, I would suggest taking the under with UAB. You can do either or here. You can either take the under 5 at minus money or under 4.5 at plus money. I think this is going to be a team that best case scenario finishes with 4 wins here. So yeah, they're going to finish with a losing record. That's the take, right, that I started out with here. So yeah, I think the Blazers are going to bottom out this year.
So basically, every team in the nation wants Bama. Birmingham.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's certainly not the Crimson Tide, and I think Auburn can be sneaky good this year. But we'll transition here. So what's the next conference you want to discuss here?
Yeah, speaking of Auburn, let's talk about the SEC and the slept-on Auburn O-line.
This slept-on Auburn O-line, oh my gosh, they did great in the portal. They got Dylan Wade from Tulsa. They got Jaden Muskrat from Tulsa. So they got both of Tulsa's offensive tackles who were really good last year, actually. And they also got ECU's starting center last year, who was one of the best centers in all college football, Avery Jones. So you've got guys who are going to come in and start right away. Now, Muskrat is going to be a depth piece, second string offensive guard for Auburn. But Dylan Wade will start at left tackle. Avery Jones will slide in at center. I think this Auburn team is going to make a bowl game this year. I think they could finish with a winning record this year. What's going to help is their non-conference. We talk about these teams who, their schedules or their records maybe don't indicate really the true makeup of the team.
Right.
Well, that could be Auburn this year, but I still think Auburn is going to be much improved this year. You have a new coach with the former Liberty coach, Hugh Freeze, and the former Ole Miss coach as well.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to be able to run the football this year. I don't know what the situation is right now with Hunter, their running back.
Right.
But whoever is running the ball, they got that USF transfer as well at running back. I think they're going to be effective because that offensive line, they're going to be good at pass blocking. They're going to be really good at run blocking. I guess the caveat with Auburn for their Florida scenario is the passing game. Now, we talked about Jair Shorter earlier, right?
Yeah.
He's now in the Plains. So, I want you, Adam, give me a take with Jair Shorter this year.
Probably won't play a ton come SEC play, but we'll see how he does in non-conference. Should be manageable at the very least, and Shorter's gonna shine there, especially once you get into that tough SEC schedule. I don't think he's good enough to be a top 2 or 3 receiver in the SEC, but
right, yeah, and
no.
I don't even know about the quarterback situation right now. Whispers indicate right now that the whispers to me have not led me to believe that the Auburn quarterbacks are going to be that much of an upgrade this year. They got the guy from Michigan State, Peyton Thorne. Peyton Thorne was effective in 2021. Michigan State was effective in 2021 because of a guy named Kenneth Walker.
Right.
Now,
that quarterback might be a thorn in Auburn's side.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Gotta throw one pun in there.
There you go. Okay, so for those of you listening, I'm usually the pun guy, but Adam beat me on that. He beat me on the pun there. So yeah, he's the punny guy today. I think Jair Shorter could be effective this year for Auburn. So what's interesting about Jair Shorter, he provides an immediate upgrade this year at receiver for Auburn because the Auburn receiving corps last year was just not good.
Right.
It just wasn't good. I think it was the worst in the SEC. I think it's worse than Vanderbilt's.
Vandy was able to knock off a couple of teams at the end of the year.
And Vanderbilt's got a decent little receiving corps this year too. I still don't think Vanderbilt's going to make a bowl game.
Yeah.
So,
go Commies.
Yeah, it's been very Commodore to see them to get that adore from everyone. But I don't really think Vanderbilt's making a bowl game this year, and I don't even think they're going to match last year's win total of 5. But I think Vanderbilt was a little fortunate last year, and I'll get into Vanderbilt and a couple of other teams who were kind of similar in that regard here in a second. But I think Auburn's receiving corps will be better than last year because guess what? That's like the lowest bar to clear. Okay, so if Auburn can be effective at running the football this year, which I think they can, I think Peyton Thorne can be better than when he was at Michigan State last year because the offensive line was banged up last year for Michigan State. A lot of injuries. And so he's going to be playing behind a much better offensive line. The non-conference is manageable. So if Auburn can get some momentum early in the season, start off pretty well, then they can get to a bowl game. And again, like I said, maybe even finish with a winning record. Okay. I would watch out for them to beat teams like Ole Miss. Vanderbilt, they play Vanderbilt this year.
Yeah, if you don't beat Vanderbilt, then get out of the SEC.
Whew. Yeah, Vanderbilt's defense is not going to be very good this year. They're not going to be good at rushing the quarterback. Their pass defense is a concern. The whole defense is a concern. But the Vanderbilt offense can be, it's hit or miss. Right. They relied a lot last year on 3rd and long. And they were kind of effective at it because the receiving corps was good at coming down with, one-on-ones, right? It's not sustainable to be good in 3rd and longs on a year-to-year basis, no matter who you have. So I think Vanderbilt's kind of in for an uphill battle this year more so than I think some people think. maybe even most. So while we're on that topic, I think teams like Vanderbilt, Arizona, and Kansas this year, I really don't see it. I'm not buying any of these three. Kansas, I think, can make a bowl game. They do have a very good offense. The defense for Kansas is another issue.
Right.
I think it's going to be one of the worst in the Power 5. But I don't think Arizona's making a bowl game. That's kind of the opposite of what a lot of people think this year. I don't think they got what it takes. They've got a tricky road schedule. A lot of their manageable games in the Pac-12, like their winnable games, are on the road.
Right.
And if you're an average team, if you're an average Power 5 team, in respect to your roster and the national average, so to speak, you want your gettable games at home,
Right.
and the games you're probably going to lose on the road.
Right.
It's flip-flop this year with Arizona. They get the teams that they're probably not going to beat at home, and then the winnable games on the road. Yeah, I think Arizona's going to be okay this year. I just don't think they're going to get to 6-6.
Right. And speaking of the Pac-12, rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace. They're going to go out with a bang this year.
Oh yeah, I mean James Droz already came for them.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. But the Pac-12 is going to be really good this year. They're going to have 5, maybe 6 legit teams.
Right. And the reigning Heisman winner, Caleb Williams.
Yeah. The quarterbacks in the Pac-12 is the best in the country this year because you got obviously Caleb Williams in Los Angeles, but you also got Michael Penix at Washington. You got Bo Nix at Oregon. A guy that I think could actually pan out this year because of the situation that he's in. I'll get to that in a second, but it's DJ Uiagalelei.
Oh, the ukulele man.
Who let the ukulele fine-tune its play? that's a situation we're watching out for this year. But yeah, I'm very high on the Beavers this year.
Yeah, they're gonna be damn good.
Good. There you go. Yeah. I've been high on the Beavers for a few months now, actually. More than a few months. Actually, more than a few months. I've had my eye on the Beavers. But I'll get to the Beavers here in a second. But just going back to the SEC real quick, a position group that I really watch out for this year, I think they are going to shock the country this year. This position group will. I don't know how great the team will be, but I watch out for this position. The Missouri defense. I think this Missouri defense is going to be top 10 in the country. I think they have a chance to be one of the best in the entire nation this year. I think they could be top 5. So there's a certain statistic that I look at when it comes to defense, total defense. I look at DFEI.
Defade.
Yeah, there you go. And I'm not going to defade many teams in the DFEI. So DFEI stands for defense. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'll spell this word out. FREMEAUX. So whatever that.
From Mo.
Maybe it is.
Maybe. Who knows? Not me. All I know is football. Not words.
But yeah, so DFEI, defense, that word, and then index efficiency. So that DFEI basically looks at how good is your defense. It doesn't take into account, like, for example, have you noticed if you look at total defense for the NCAA, like .com, like if you were to go just pull up normal stats, the average stat, you're going to see a lot of triple option teams. The military academy's up there in total defense.
Right.
Want to know why? Because those defenses are never on the field
right.
the time possession.
Right.
So DFEI doesn't look at it that way. They just look at how good is your defense when it's on the field. Not the points per game allowed, not the total yards. That stuff can be skewed based on schemes.
Time possession.
Time possession, schemes, strength of schedule, maybe turnover differential. Maybe your offense gives up a lot of points, and so it looks bad for the defense. Field position, whatnot. No, DFEI simply just looks at how good is your defense. I think that stat is what Missouri is going to be in the top 10 at this year. And maybe they'll be top 10 in some other stats too. The thing, though, is that the Missouri strength of schedule is one of the most difficult in the country. The offense is not going to be up to the standard of the defense. And so I think the defense could be on the field a decent amount. The quality of offenses that the defense is going to be facing is also really high. And so the stats may not look as great. I think they'll still be really good. But it may not look elite. But if you were to look up at the conclusion of the regular season, so look up the first week, or how about this, the first day, December 1st. Look up December 1st, DFEI for 2023, and I bet you will find the Missouri Tigers in the top 10, if not maybe the top 5.
Oh yeah.
So
Gonna be yelling MIZHWHO.
you know what? And so I guess I'll transition here into another topic here. Looking at teams who could start the season off hot and then kind of fade maybe in the second half. Start with Missouri.
Oh yeah.
I think Missouri's going to beat Kansas State this year, and I've got a couple of Kansas State I got a couple of family members who went to Kansas State, and I've got a couple of friends who are huge K-State fans, so they're probably not going to like that. But I think Missouri is legit this year. You can actually get Missouri at plus money at 6.5 right now. I think Missouri is finishing with the winning record. Now I mentioned earlier that schedule's difficult, so now let's get into that schedule. I think they'll start off hot. I think they'll go undefeated in the non-conference, which would include wins against Kansas State, which will be played in Columbia this year, and then they play Memphis in St. Louis for a neutral site game.
That's right. Yeah.
Neutral site.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll be a fun atmosphere in the former LA or St. Louis Rams, now
Yes.
LA Rams Stadium.
Right. I think Missouri is going to beat Memphis in that game as well. So I think Missouri, then they'll win the non-conference, and I think they'll beat Vanderbilt on the road for the first conference win. So they're 5-0 here. Worst case, 4-1. So I think they'll start off well. I think a lot of people are going to be talking about them. Then that second half of the schedule is really difficult. They got to go. They got LSU in the crossover from the West Division. Although they'll play LSU at home. The last time LSU went to Columbia, Missouri, they lost, and that was in the COVID year.
Right.
Goal line stand for the Missouri defense. So we'll see what Missouri can do in that game. Then they got to go to Kentucky right after that. Then they'll get a bye week, and then they got to go to Georgia, and then they'll South Carolina, Tennessee, Florida at home. They'll get those 3 at home, and then they'll have to play against Arkansas on the road last game of the year. So it's a gauntlet of the second half. But I think this Missouri team, I talked about the over at 6.5 plus money. I think that's a good bet. I think this team is at least good enough to finish 7-5, if not maybe 8-4. And if their offense can click pretty well, they got a guy, Luther Burden, at receiver. I think is going to be a breakthrough guy this year.
True sophomore this year.
Exactly.
So still young.
Yes. I think he's going to have that freshman to sophomore leap this year. He's playing in the slot, which is actually his preferred position. The slot receiver is really featured in the Missouri offense. I think this offense is going to do a lot better this year. Now, again, I'm not setting the bar high for the offense like I am for the defense, but I do think the offense will improve and potentially significantly improve. And I'll tell you why. Brady Cook, the receiver from the quarterback from Missouri, he played with an injury in his shoulder.
Right.
He had he played with the full year last year.
Yeah.
He hurt it against Kansas State, which was one of the reasons why Missouri lost to Kansas State with the margin that they did. You got a healthy Brady Cook now quarterback.
Yeah.
You've got a receiving core, which I actually think will be better despite losing Lovett to Georgia in the transfer portal. Mookie Cooper is a guy to watch out for. They got Theo Weiss coming in from the portal. He's got that upperclassmen experience. So you got some undervalued talent at receiver from Missouri. The offensive line, they got Foster at left tackle. I think he will be a first team, if worst, second team All-SEC, potential All-American there. They got a really good transfer from Houston that's going to be playing in the interior of the offensive line. So they did good in the portal for the offensive line. So if the offensive line can stay healthy for Missouri, and obviously I guess if Cook can stay healthy this year, I think he can cook things up this year. And I think Missouri could be a really good team this year. Just a really difficult schedule.
Yeah, just got to let Brady cook. Low-hanging fruit, but I love it.
Yeah. So watch out for Missouri this year. They'll start off well. Again, maybe fade a little bit towards the end of the year. I'm going to give a team that I'm going to be, but I think Missouri can finish with a winning record, potentially top 25. One thing that I would watch out for this year, I think this team is getting too much love in the preview magazines and in the media. Some publications don't like it when you just refer to them as media, so I did generalize there, but I'll summarize it up with saying the media. I am not a believer in South Carolina at all this year.
Yeah. So you're not a fan of the Cox, the Gamecocks.
Oh, correct. Exactly. Yeah. I don't think Rattler is like that dude.
Oh yeah, no, he's. So he was the starting quarterback my sister's senior year at OU, and
Yeah.
that was his one good year.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that was during
the
COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the COVID year. Yeah. So Rattler was one of the most turnover-prone Power 5 quarterbacks last year. And I worry it's going to be the same this year. South Carolina has a new OC, so we'll see if that helps. But the receiving core outside of Antoine Juice Wells, I don't see it. They got Eddie Lewis from Memphis, from the transfer portal. He's experienced. He's a senior, so he was the top receiver from Memphis last year. So it's a quality pickup. I don't know if it's enough to overcome the other losses at receiver for South Carolina from last year. They're going to rely on a ton of true freshmen. Yes, they are talented. I just think the hype is a year or two early for South Carolina. The issue that I have with the Gamecocks this year, the offensive line. I think the offensive line could be one of the worst in the Power 5. I significantly downgraded this offensive line this year. I'll summarize it up. They weren't that good last year,
Right.
and they lose three. They're by far the top three players, and then they're going to have a lot of true freshmen that aren't exactly like 5-star players that have that talent immediately. They're going to be playing a lot of freshmen this year up front, and the worst thing is that they're going to be playing guys at offensive tackle who shouldn't be playing offensive tackle.
Yeah.
I really worry about the South Carolina team this year. I don't think they're going to live up to whatever hype is being discussed with South Carolina. The over/under is 6.5. So again, the market is trying to give you a hint here. They're probably not going to be all that great of a team this year. They might make a bowl game. They've overachieved the first 2 years of Shane Beamer.
Right.
They're going to have to overachieve for a third straight year, which is not sustainable stuff here.
Right.
So I don't see it with South Carolina this year. Maybe they make a bowl game. That's kind of my top for them, 6-6.
Right. And I mean, bowl win really only depends on like if they get like a lower tier group of 5.
Yeah, or maybe they get a Power 5 team who's having a bunch of opt-outs or whatever.
Yeah.
Because Shane Beamer's teams will play in their they'll come ready to play for the bowl game.
Oh, yeah.
So they'll show up, man. So something to watch this year though. South Carolina, what they do in 1-score games and close games, they have really good special teams. So that could help them in close games. So I guess that could be the difference between their floor and their ceiling. And I see a lot of people give these floor and ceiling scenarios of like these 5 or 6 game ranges. Like, best case, they go 10-2. Worst case, things fall off the map. They get a lot of injuries. Whatnot. The new hires don't work. Maybe you have a new hire at one of the coordinators and you go 5-7.
Yeah.
Like anyone can give a range of that. I'm going to give a range of, like my ranges at the most. If I don't give a record prediction straight up, I give a range of like 2.
Right.
And my range this year for South Carolina is 5-7 to 7-5.
Right.
Like,
not that good.
Yeah, it's not that special. I think they were going to regress in their regular season win total this year. Maybe they get to a bowl, but that's tops. This team's not finishing ranked. They got a really difficult schedule. Their matchup predictor, like if you pull up ESPN, it shows you the percentage chance for each team to win. Okay, well, matchup predictor's got South Carolina going like 4-8 or 5-7 this year. So the market has their win totals at 6.5. I've seen a ton of people hammer that over. Woo! I'd be careful. I'm not saying it's impossible. What I'm saying is I just be careful with that. The market knows what they're doing, and there's a reason why the number is that low. So, the SEC West, we just previewed the SEC East. Georgia's probably going to be in the playoff again this year.
Yeah, losing their QB1, but
yeah,
I mean it's Georgia. Like whoever steps in there is going to be good.
Yeah, a game that I would watch for is Missouri against Georgia. Missouri almost beat Georgia last year.
Yeah,
and
coming off a bye.
Yep, Missouri's gonna be coming off a bye, and they gotta go, to Athens to play. So that's obviously not going to be easy. I'm not suggesting Missouri is going to win that game. What I'm suggesting is
Give him a little stare.
The conversation here is what game could be close for Georgia this year.
Right.
And I think that game could be interesting in that respect because I think Missouri's defense is going to be elite this year. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's going to be top 10 in the country in DFEI. Remember, Missouri almost beat Georgia last year. Do not forget about that. So they had the lead for over 85% of that game.
Yeah.
So don't sleep. I guess I'm going to use a generalized term there. It's kind of an overused term, the sleep term, but don't sleep on Missouri. Do not sleep on the Tigers this year. And then don't sleep on the Tigers, either Tiger from the West Division with Auburn this year, who I think, as I mentioned earlier, will make a bowl game and maybe finish with a winning record, and then LSU.
Livy State University.
Livy State University. There you go. You got me on the
My
dad
future
jokes
wife
today.
right there. Not even lying.
Living up right now.
Oh yeah, Livy, if you're watching this, I love you.
So-
Well, probably won't.
So I guess the question is, will LSU livy up to the talent?
Oh, of course. You know, you
There's
got.
a pun there for y'all.
Oh yeah, you've got a crazy athletic white girl.
Yeah.
You've got a literal tiger over there.
Yes. Little Tiger.
Yes. And I mean,
Bayou Bengal.
oh yeah, and I mean Ed Orgeron doesn't coach there anymore, but go Tigers.
Right. As only he could say it.
Yeah, which I can't.
I'm not even
coaching.
going to try to imitate. Yeah, I'm not even going to try to impersonate Ed Ogeron there.
Yeah, looking like Farmer Fran from The Water Boy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Right. Oh, there were so many memes with that. Oh, I love that. So, I think LSU is playing in the SEC championship this year. I don't know if they're going to make the playoff because they've got a tricky schedule. First of all, their first game against Florida State.
Yeah.
I
Which
think Florida State's legit this year. I don't know if they're playoff worthy, but I think they're legit.
right, like I think that they'll win 10 games.
Yes. Oh,
Whether-
my expectation for them is 11 games, but
Oh yeah, they were definitely my pick as a sleeper for the playoffs. Florida State, it's whether or not they do well against their SEC foes. But at
yeah,
least for me, but
yeah, that's true. You get the first game and the last game against
Right.
LSU and Florida. It's tricky games there. Although I'll have to admit, I'm selling Florida this year. I don't think they're making a bowl game
Yeah.
either. They've got the most difficult schedule in the country, and that would be not just in respect to their own roster. If Georgia had Florida's schedule, we'd be shedding different light on Georgia. I mean, yeah,
Right.
it's Georgia. We'd be taking it with a grain of salt. But my point being, it doesn't matter who would be playing with Florida's schedule. It's the most difficult schedule in the country. And then you look at Florida, they've got a lot of questions on their roster
Oh,
this
yeah.
year. Very young team.
QB2,
Yes.
Jalen Kitna, just a lot of controversy with that.
Graham Mertz is
Yeah.
going to be the starting quarterback.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's all I need to say.
yeah.
The
Can't
receivers.
win transfer, Wisconsin.
Yeah, and by the way, yeah, exactly, Wisconsin. Yeah. The cheeseheads over there.
Hey,
Can't so.
yeah.
Okay, so here's
Can't win.
so here's the thing about Florida. Yeah, as I mentioned, the most difficult schedule in the country. So as I mentioned earlier with Arizona, the winnable games Arizona has to get them on the road, right? That's the thing with Florida. Teams like Missouri, Kentucky, South Carolina, although I'm not high on South Carolina, I'm not high on Florida either.
Yeah.
And those are winnable games, right? For
Right.
Florida. If things go right, they can win those games. Well, they got all three of them on the road.
Yeah.
It just makes it more of an uphill battle. You still got to face Utah in Salt Lake City. Yes,
Right.
I know there's the Cam Rising factor if he's going to be healthy.
Yeah.
He's not going to be fully healthy, but
Right.
he still might play.
I mean, he might rise to the challenge. Who knows?
Yeah, there's another one. Okay, Adam's got me beat on the dad jokes and the puns today, so I'll just go off on the analysis. He'll go off on the dad jokes here. I got news for y'all. So Florida fans, cover your ears here. 60% Cam Rising is better than Graham Mertz fully healthy.
Oh, 100%.
So, and then you got the Utah defense, which should be better this year and should be improved. It's always good, but it should be better this year. And then the Florida defense it should be better. It was 99th in total defense last year. It's a low bar to clear for Florida. Okay, they're usually better than that, so they should be improved, but they're nothing special. It's nothing that's going to scare you and take over games, which they're going to have to with their offense. And this isn't just like the Graham Mertz hate show, okay? Their receiving core is an issue. Like Ricky Pearsall is a legit college player. He's not like an All-American.
Right.
The rest of the receiving core, they're going to be relying on true freshmen. So for you devil's advocates out there who says, just because they're true freshmen doesn't mean they're going to be bad. Oh, I know. But when you got a quarterback like Graham Mertz and you're a true freshman playing against the most difficult schedule in the country with a ton of really good defenses, starting off from first to last with Utah and Florida State in the non-conference, you got Georgia, you got a road trip against LSU, a road trip against Missouri, Kentucky's defense is good.
Right.
And then South Carolina's defense is probably not going to be that good, but their secondary is their strength. So are you expecting these true freshmen with Graham Mertz to just explode off the scene? Like, what are you expecting here? So I really question this Florida team. The offensive line doesn't have enough depth to withstand injuries. The running back room for Florida is great.
Right.
I don't know about the rest of that
Right.
team.
Yeah. I mean,
So-
what you're saying is Graham Mertz will hurt.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Graham Hurts this year,
Yeah.
not
Oh.
Graham Mertz.
How hurts the Gators' chances?
Yes. You're probably looking at an overall win total here of 4 or 5 wins for Florida, I would say. I really doubt they get to 6. There's a scenario where maybe South Carolina bottoms out this year. Florida can bottom out, though, for that matter. Arkansas at home is a winnable game, but get a load of this. The 2 most winnable games, in my opinion, outside of Vanderbilt in conference play for the Gators are a home game against the Razorbacks, and then the road trip against the Gamecocks. But both South Carolina and Arkansas are going to be coming off of bye weeks
Right.
for those 2 games. Meanwhile, Florida won't be. And then for the Arkansas game, Florida is going to be coming off the Georgia game, and Arkansas is going to be coming off a bye. So I just don't see it with Florida this year. You can actually get a load of this. The win total is 5.5 for Florida. So obviously the market's saying it's going to be a 5 or 6 win season. For some reason, it's juiced to the over. So maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm taking plus money on the under for Florida this year.
All right.
So, I gave a little bit of a win total bets there. I guess for some people, some offers, maybe some advice.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully, it's not terrible advice.
Sound financial advice from your certified financial planner over here.
Well, at least in the college football betting world,
Yeah.
I still need to get better with the actual market.
Yeah.
So I guess the West Division, to me, it's going to be between Alabama and LSU. The thing with me with Bama this year, I know the storyline has been they're probably not going to be as good this year.
Oh yeah.
Give me your thought on Bama.
I mean, yeah, I definitely think they'll be good, like 10, 11 wins, but just not as good as, Georgia, who also is getting a new QB1. I think the SEC championship will either be Georgia Bama or Georgia LSU. It's just a matter of who gets luckier between Bama and LSU in those one-score games. As we saw last year, Bama lost out on a spot in the SEC championship because of last-second losses to Tennessee and I believe LSU. So, I mean, if you win even just one of those games, you're playing Georgia in the SEC championship, maybe knock them off, and maybe the playoff looks a little bit different, and TCU doesn't make it in.
Right. Bama last year, to me, I'm still surprised they didn't make the playoff because I thought they and Ohio State were the 2 best teams last year.
I agree.
I still think that. But see, here's my thought on the Crimson Tide this year. I know there's been discussion with the quarterback room, and it is going to be a downgrade from Bryce Young.
Right. The first Bama player ever to be drafted number 1 overall.
Yeah, kind of crazy to think about, isn't it?
Like with how much talent they've pumped out, like their
especially in
NFLU.
the 21st century.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean they were pretty good when Bear Bryant was their coach, but
Right.
yeah, they were not that good in the 80s. They had one good year in the 90s. They won the national championship that year. 92, one of the best defenses ever, that Bama defense that year. So here's my thought on Bama this year. I guess if I were to have a take about them, could they see a year where it's a little bit of a down year?
Right.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm not going to say no to that idea. There is some good thought put into that with the quarterback room and the offense, and a lot of new faces on defense and a tricky schedule. I get it.
Right.
I get that take and that idea for those that are discussing that matter with their win total. But here's what I would say. If I were to make a take on Alabama this year in regards to maybe them not being as strong this year. So last year, first of all, I'll kind of want to set this up. Last year, Bryce Young carried that team, that offense, I should say. The receiving core was nothing special in regards to Bama standards.
Right.
The offensive line was nothing special in regards to Bama standards. And the running back room was really good, at least with one guy who's now in the NFL. Here's where I'm getting at. Without Bryce Young, the offense is nothing special last year.
Right.
Okay, so if we're talking in regards to former Alabama teams in the Bama standard here, if you were to go through the years of the Saban dynasty, since they were really dominant in 08 and then they won the national championship in 09, their SEC, say with me here, their SEC win, or their, I'm trying to figure out the term here, the SEC point per margin per game. So I'm going to pull out a stat that I actually did a study on a few months ago. So here is their Alabama's SEC point per game differential since 2008. Plus 17.5, plus 18.75, plus 9.38, plus 25.5, plus 26.63, plus 23.5, plus 14, plus 14.13, plus 23.20, plus 26.13, plus 32.63, plus 19.63, plus 32.7, plus 12.88, and then this past year, plus 15.88. Those are some crazy good numbers, right?
2 scores every
yeah,
game.
Exactly. I think that number could look lower this year because I don't think Bama has as much star power to be as dominant this year. So again, maybe we see this in their win total, right? If they go 9-3 this year, guess what? This take will come true. But even if they still go 10-2, 11-1, I still think that will come true because if you look at their games this year, you can make the case the most difficult conference games would be LSU, Tennessee, and they get them both at home. And then if you want to consider Texas a conference game because they're moving to the SEC, they get them at home as well.
Yeah.
They got the road trip against A&M.
Yeah, and in all honesty, UT should have knocked them off
Yes.
last year.
Yeah.
Shout out Mullet Daddy, Twin Ewers.
And then you got games you should win, but because they're on the road,
More of a question.
Yeah, technically more of a question. I don't think it's really going to matter likely straight up, but at least in terms of win-loss, but it could matter for the spread, which again, that's why I'm going back to the point per game differential. So they got some road games against Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Auburn. Do not overlook that Auburn game, though, on the road in the Plains. Here's my take, I guess, on Alabama this year. Their SEC point per game differential will be lower than it normally is. What will that number look like? I don't know, maybe plus 7 point something, plus 8 point something, but I don't see it being in the double digits this year. Whether or not Bama's record changes, I still think you're going to see that with their point per game differential. So look for Bama to be in closer than normal games overall this year.
And it's worth noting, every year under Saban, it's been double digits. So
only once since the dynasty began, basically. Since that it hasn't not been in double digits. So, and get a load of this. That was their their one kind of down year in 2010. That was their worst team, arguably, since at least the second year of Saban in Tuscaloosa. So, I don't think Bama's all that special this year. They're still elite, probably. I mean, their talent is just insane. So the quarterback room does kind of scare me a little bit. I don't think it's that great. So for those that are just assuming it's because it's Bama, they're going to be great there at quarterback. They're not going to be great at quarterback. They still might be a great team. They're not going to be great at quarterback. So
I'd have loved to see Austin Nani out there for Bama.
He would be better. He would be the best quarterback on the roster right now if he was playing.
Yeah.
At least for this year. Yeah.
Yeah. And 17 interceptions in Conference USA last year.
Mm-hmm.
Not good.
Yeah, his ceiling would be higher though than any other quarterback for them right now.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I mean, he's got a lot of experience.
Maybe not Ty Simpson, but yeah.
Yeah, he's got a lot of experience. More so, and years lived than actual football. But I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, I think Ty Simpson's ceiling is actually pretty good. So maybe not Ty Simpson, but the Milroe and certainly Buckner. He's got a higher ceiling than. I think Ty Simpson is the quarterback, I guess, for the future for the Tide. But this year, I don't know, man. It's going to be a revolving door there, I think, throughout the year.
Yeah, might as well just put CFE out there, let him cook.
And I'm short and tiny, so
just run QB draw, hide behind the O line.
Which has not even been that special the last few years. So I'm probably running out of bounds. I'm going to try to go around the edge, maybe try to pick up a handful of yards and go out of bounds. Yeah, I'm not really going to be taking many hits because we discussed Bryce Young on that other episode, how he's not really that he doesn't have that long-term probably success in the NFL because of his size. Maybe, right? That's the caveat. That would be the caveat for me too.
Oh yeah.
At any level of football, I don't care what level. It could be Pee-wee. Yeah. So, all right. What do you want to discuss next? We've been talking for a little while.
Man, yeah. It's been a hot minute since we started this episode, but yeah, let's see here. Still with the playoffs, the playoff predictions. Who's your top six, I guess?
Okay, top six. That makes it easier on me because, it'll be splitting hairs is the term Bruce Davis will use in November. That's another little take here. That term, splitting hairs, you're going to be hearing that on ESPN with guys like Reese Davis and Kirk Herbstreit. They love to use that term when they're splitting hairs between the different top 8 to 10 teams that are vying for a playoff spot in the latter part of the year. Okay, so here's my top six. Most likely, I guess, to make the playoff. I guess put them in any order. Well, I think there's a top two with Michigan and Georgia, and Michigan. Flip-flop those teams. I don't care. Whatever you want to do. I'm looking at strength of schedule, and I put Michigan there first. I guess third, the most confident team on next would be USC. But they got a really difficult back half of the schedule. But I do trust Caleb Williams. I think the defense will be better. It's a low bar to clear. I get it. They were great at forcing turnovers last year. That's not sustainable on a year-to-year term. On a year-to-year basis, trying to force turnovers. Unless you're Iowa, it's not sustainable on a year-to-year basis.
I mean, you'd think Iowa's offense being so bad year after year wouldn't be sustainable either. But
you would think teams would figure out to not let Iowa's defense beat them. But teams they get a little happy with the offense, right? They get a little. They like to get flashy. That's when Iowa's defense makes you pay. But I guess after USC, wow.
I mean,
it gets a little. Okay, so I guess I'll give you three teams who I think will be vying for that next spot. I guess Ohio State, because if their only loss is to Michigan, then
and top two team.
Yeah, they're still going to be one of the top
considered
most talented teams. So they're kind of like them last year. They could still be considered. So I guess I don't know the exact order with these next few teams. If you want whatever order you want to put these next few teams, I'm okay with. But I guess I throw Ohio State in there. They're ultra talented. The only issue that I have with Ohio State this year is the offensive tackles. And then we'll see what the new quarterback or quarterbacks do. But the offensive tackles is what I'm most concerned about for Ohio State this year. LSU and Florida State, I guess it depends on what they do in the first game. I'd watch out for those teams. Let's see. After that, kind of going through the teams.
I feel like Bama is going to be up there simply because they're Bama, not because they'll be good.
As good. Yeah, they'll still be really good. I just don't know if they'll be elite this year. So, but yeah, I think Bama will be in that 7 to 9 range probably. Maybe 6 to 9 range, but I don't think they'll make the playoff this year.
Yeah.
Let's see who else. Truthfully, I don't think Washington's going to be in the playoff mix. I think they're a really good team that'll be in the top 15. I just don't see playoff mix this year.
I feel like that's how Tennessee is as well.
Yeah,
like, it'll be
probably
good.
so. Yeah, honestly, I think Washington is better than Tennessee. I don't think Tennessee's all that this year.
Yeah, so you don't see any 10s out in Tennessee.
That's right.
Little pickup line.
That's right. No 10s that I see on the field really for them this year.
Oh, yeah. Aside from the jersey numbers, maybe.
Right. I'm not a believer in Joe Milton. If he if he was as good as people are making him up to be this year, he would have already been a starting quarterback somewhere.
Right.
We'll see if he pans out this last year. He's obviously got a cannon for an arm. He can throw that thing 90 yards, but he can throw the pigskin as long as anyone can probably right now that's living on this planet. But his accuracy, consistency. I know Tennessee fans are going to mention he threw 10 touchdowns and no interceptions last year.
Good for him.
Good for him.
Do it over a full year.
Yeah, do it for a full year and as a starter, and without the receivers they had last year too. And then the offensive tackles for Tennessee are going to be new this year, so we'll see what the pass blocking is like. Defensively for Tennessee, run defense will be okay. The linebackers I do have some questions for. So pass defense, they struggled with injuries last year, which didn't help their numbers. Well, it's a low bar to clear for them to improve in their pass defense. They finished in the triple digits last year. So you notice I'm giving that term a lot, low bar to clear, because people will mention, well, we should be better than last year because we were this. Yeah, because it's a low bar to clear, but it's not exactly because you're good.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I use that term quite often, because it gets old when people say, we're going to be better. Well, yeah, statistically you're this, so you should be better.
Browns fans have been saying that for years.
Right.
And look how good they are right now.
Yeah, and even when they improve, right, it's a low bar to clear. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, going from the first overall pick to barely outside the top 5.
Right, so that's a perfect example of what I'm saying here. I guess other teams that I could see sneak up there, so...
UNT.
Okay. Oh, you know what? Actually, let's go with the Texas team. I am a believer in the Longhorns this year. I think they can beat Alabama in week 2. I know you don't like the Longhorns, but I'm a believer in Texas.
I am a Longhorn hater. Like, I don't think they'll be... Like, I think they'll be good. They'll probably beat OU again. 49 zip, not happening again.
That's not happening.
But I think they could beat Bama and could be top 10, easily top 15.
Yeah, see, that's where I am with Texas. I think they're top 10 this year. We'll see if they kind of hit their ceiling scenario. They normally, underachieve, right? I think they've got a lot of room for error. And, we've seen Texas lately. They normally need that room for error. And they've got it this year. But do not be shocked if they beat Alabama in week 2. I know people are going to be like, oh my gosh, another person on the hype train for Texas. Let me say this real quick about Texas. For those that are saying, we saw the preseason media poll for the Big 12 come out, a month ago, and Texas was atop that media poll. They were projected first in the media. And then I saw a lot of people saying, Texas never lives up to the hype. It's true they never live up to the hype. But if they are talking about the preseason media poll hype, I don't think a lot of people realize this. Do you know the last time Texas was projected first in the preseason media poll?
Been a long time.
2009. You know what happened that year? They finished first. They played in the national championship. Probably would have won it had Colt McCoy not gotten hurt. So I think Texas is legit this year. If not this year, my question is when?
Right.
So
I mean, they've got Arch Manning, true freshman. They'll probably redshirt him.
Yeah. Okay. So for those who are looking at that quarterback room and the names, which are Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning.
Yeah. Two perfect recruits.
Yeah.
Like, Arch definitely didn't deserve it. Quinn
probably not. Yeah.
Yeah. Quinn probably didn't deserve it. I mean, he's the real deal, but.
Well, he's more of a real deal than Arch is, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, he only got that perfect recruit ranking because of his last name. Like, he's good, but not perfect recruit good.
Yeah. The reason why I want to bring up the quarterback room here for a second is because the guy who probably will get a lot of playing time, I think, this year, and no one's talking about him outside of Texas fans. Malik Murphy. Yeah. This guy's a dude. He'd be a starter for most teams right now. I'm kind of surprised he didn't enter the portal.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have loved to have him here and didn't, but,
Oh, yeah, who else would have loved to have him is Florida. I bet Florida was looking at him. Maybe Auburn, too, actually. Florida and Auburn were looking at quarterbacks through the portal this year. So here's a little nugget for you Texas fans here. If y'all are thinking, yeah, we could beat Bama this year, this does seem like a decent chance. I mean, we should have beat them last year, but I guess the caveat is are we going to have a quarterback that goes down with an injury again?
Uh-huh.
If y'all do, you got Malik Murphy as your backup. It was better than Bama's quarterbacks
Right.
put together, in my
Right.
opinion.
And keep in mind, you're allowed to play in 4 games at the FBS level and retain your red shirt. So maybe look for Arch Manning to get some snaps.
Some snaps, yeah, is the correct term, because I think Malik Murphy is going to be a second
Oh, yeah.
string, definitely. So Texas fans, if Quinn Ewers goes down with an injury against Alabama again, don't worry, you got Malik Murphy. And your third string quarterback might be better than Alabama's first string anyway. So,
Oh, yeah.
I think Texas can win that game straight up in Tuscaloosa. It's a game I'd watch for. That spread at one point was Alabama minus 7.5. If that spread is more than a touchdown, betting advice, I would take Texas plus the points, because the very worst, Texas, they normally lose in those close games. Texas, that room for error that I was discussing earlier, a lot of it is just the mental toughness for them.
Right.
They don't find a way to win those games that come down to the wire oftentimes. So if it does come down to the wire and Texas does find themselves on the losing side of things, guess what? That spread's still going to be under, or it's going to be 7 or less. So if you can get Texas at more than a touchdown as an underdog, I would take Texas plus the points, because I think they can win straight up. That's an upset watch that I'd watch for early in the year. So I guess Texas could be one of those dark horse playoff teams, potential elite teams this year. I think that the rankings for college football this year, if you were to put teams into different tiers, I think Tier 2 this year is a lot closer to Tier 1 than it normally is. And so for that reason, I think I can project 3 teams comfortably in the playoff. I say comfortably. How about 2 comfortably? Georgia and Michigan. After that, it's like, I think USC can get there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
After that, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we saw what happened last year against Utah twice. James Droz came for USC's butt and just made 2 all-time what happened videos.
Pause.
No, none of that stereotypical UNT student stuff here. Yeah, I'm taking shots here on my own stool, friendly fire enabled.
I guess those 3 I would look for to make the playoff. If you're looking at 2 others, I guess the next best 2 odds would be Ohio State, I would say, and then, after that, it's a drop off. I guess the winner of the LSU Florida State game, I would say, and then maybe Texas.
Yeah.
So, I'm not a believer in Washington to the playoff this year. Am I a believer in Washington as a New Year's 6 contender, potential top 10 team? Absolutely. The thing you got to watch for with Washington this year, and there's another team like this too that I'll get to next here, is their schedule. Last year they had the most manageable schedule in the Pac-12. They were playing the role of the hunter last year. They're going to be playing the role of the hunted this year. I think Washington kind of hit their ceiling last year. They finished 11-2. I don't see them finishing better than 10-2 this year, but at the same time, I don't see them finishing worse than 9-3.
Right.
So, like I said, I don't think they're going to fall off the map this year. I think this is a legit team, really good team, potentially great team that can finish 9-3, 10-2, and their win total at sportsbooks, at every single sportsbook, is 9.5. I would not bet on that. I know people are going to be very tempted to take that over there. I wouldn't do that if I were you, because I could see 9-3 with this team, but I think they're 9-3, 10-2, top 15 team, potentially top 10 for sure. They got a really difficult November slate, so they'll probably start off well. We'll see what they do in November. I mentioned a second ago about the team who I'm kind of fading a little bit this year. I shouldn't say fade, because the sports books only had this win total at 6.5, and there's a reason why. A lot of people have been hammering this over for this particular team, and this particular team is Duke.
Oh, yeah. Still one of our O-line transfer recruits, I might add.
Yes,
Yeah.
So here's my issue with Duke this year. They've been a very common over for a lot of people, and they might hit the over and go 7-5. I really doubt they go better than 7-5 this year, though. Kind of like South Carolina, I see a range of like 5-7 to 7-5. So a lot of people have been tabbing Duke as their sneaky good ACC team. Not too many people really have them in the ACC championship, really not anyone. But you've had some people pick them to upset Clemson in that Week 1 game on that Monday night. I don't see it with Duke. So last year, they only played 4 teams with a winning record.
Yeah.
This year, they're going to play 8 teams last year who finished with a winning record. The schedule, kind of like with Washington, right? You broke through. No one was paying attention to you. Now everyone knows who you are.
Right.
You return a quality team who might be better than last year's team. But I think the regular season win total will regress here. I'll say 7-5, but that does not mean that I'm suggesting people to take that over. Do not bet on that win total. I think this is one of the most high variant teams in the country. The ACC in itself is high variance. Like, I think Boston College, who finished 3-9 last year, could make a bowl game this year because I think the schedule is very manageable, and I think, people may not agree with that take. Watch Boston College make a bowl game this year. But yeah, I think Duke's a 6-6, 7-5 team this year. And win totals at 6.5. Again, I'd stay away from that number. I know a lot of people are going to be enticed to take that over. I would stay away from it because I think there's a scenario where they go 5-7 or 6-6. So, very difficult schedule for Duke. A quality team who, again, they might pull off an upset, go 7-5, but they're certainly not going to do better than they did last year. And so I don't think they're a breakthrough team or anything like that. But they are a quality team. But, the way college football works, for those of y'all listening, I need y'all to listen. I've been talking for more than an hour and 20 minutes here. So I need y'all to listen to this, at least for this next 10 seconds. In college football, a team is as good as their schedule allows them to be. So Duke is as good as their schedule allows them to be. Not as good as their roster allows them to be. Schedule. Sure, their roster has some to do with it, but it's mostly schedule. Duke's schedule is one of the most difficult in the conference this year in the ACC. So yeah, I think you're looking at around a 500 team. They I say should. They'll probably get back to a bowl game, but again, it's a difficult schedule. And what does Matchup Predictor think? I already told you what the market thinks. Matchup Predictor 4-8. So believe it or not, I'm actually not underselling this team. So don't harp on me for that comment about Duke.
Might need Daniel Jones taking snaps from Vanilla Vic out here.
So I think with Riley at quarterback, and a pretty good offensive line, at least the starters are good. For Duke, I don't like the depth up front. Receivers are pretty good. Defense, decent. So I think it's a good team with a difficult schedule. It's not a great team. Last year, they were an average team with a really manageable schedule. So don't get fooled on that. Some people get fooled with the market. The market knows what they're doing, right? The market really never loses. So you gotta play your money smart. Speaking of playing your money smart, I've got an over bet for y'all. I mentioned Missouri. That's a confident over bet for me. Got another one for y'all. An over bet. Texas Tech, over 7.5 wins this year. It's actually plus money right now. So it's slightly shaded to the under. This team is legit this year. I think they're going to go at least 9-3. Is that a hot take? Maybe for some, but for Tech fans, it's not. Tech fans believe that they can win the Big 12 this year, and I agree. I am not saying take the plus money on them to win the conference. I'm suggesting taking the over. Hammer that 7.5.
Right.
This team, a senior-laden team, one of the last super senior teams of the COVID era, if you will. I should say the super senior era. They are loaded with talent this year, and I know the talk has been they lose Tyree Wilson on defense to the NFL first-round draft pick. They're going to be better on defense this year. Everyone get ready. This defense is about to be the best Tech defense that probably a lot of y'all listening here today have ever watched for the Red Raiders. So
we'll be spreading that Raider rash across the Big 12.
Yeah, I am really high on this Texas Tech defensive line this year. They bring back their 2 fifth-year seniors up front on the defensive tackles position. They'll be good at stuffing the run this year. They have NFL upside. But the 2 guys that I would really watch out for, who I think will be NFL draft selections, I don't know about first round, but I think they'll make the NFL draft next April. That's a transfer from Syracuse, another senior of the senior-laden team, Steve Linton. I think he'll be one of the biggest breakthrough defensive ends/pass rushers in the country this year. He's more of like an outside linebacker, but he'll be a true pass rusher for the Red Raiders. That's a guy I'd watch out for. He played sparingly last year for Syracuse. Really flashed, though, if you watch his tape. And he's going to get that starting nod this year for the Red Raiders. It's a guy that's really flashed in the spring for Tech. I cannot wait to watch this guy. So again, keep an eye out for Steve Linton. Another guy I watch out for opposite Linton is Miles Cole. He's another super senior for this Red Raiders team. I think it's 6'6", 285.
Dang.
This guy's huge, and he can move. He will be an NFL draft selection next April. He's got a lot of upside. You didn't know about this guy yet because he played behind Tyree Wilson, but this guy is legit, and now he's going to be the starter at where Tyree used to be last year. This Texas Tech defensive line is legit this year. I mean, breakthrough position group discussion here. Watch out for the Red Raiders defensive front. I don't love the secondary for the Red Raiders. They don't have a ton of speed, but they got some decent size. Malik Dunlap's a pretty good corner. They're all super seniors back there. So yeah, they're loaded with seniors this year. Don't ever bet against a team that has some quality players with some NFL upside and experience, especially a senior-laden team like this. Do not ever bet against a team like that. If you're not a believer in Tech, okay, but don't bet on the under is what I'm saying here. If anything, you're taking the over. And I am here. I'm hammering the over. The Texas Tech secondary, again, the speed's not that great, but with the front four getting pressure, I think they will this year, and the senior experience, they got some pretty good size. They're physical. They're going to play some press man coverage this year. They travel well, and what I mean by that is not necessarily they travel well location-wise in terms of location of the game itself, but they travel well, meaning when offenses change up their scheme, they communicate well. They've really gotten good at their communication in the spring. Here's a little inside information on the Red Raiders here. They're going to communicate really well defensively this year. A senior-laden group who I think will be one of your bigger breakthrough teams for this year in the Red Raiders. The last time Texas Tech finished a season ranked was 2009. Their head coach that year, the late, great Mike Leach, who we know unfortunately passed away several months ago. Look for Texas Tech to finish ranked for the first time since 2009 this year. That's a take. Book it. The encyclopedia says book it for that. And I think Texas Tech has a great chance of at least making the Big 12 championship. I think there's 3 teams in the Big 12 this year that are vying for a spot in Arlington in early December. That's Texas, Oklahoma. Their schedule is very manageable this year. I know Adam probably likes to hear that here.
Yeah.
Very manageable schedule. We'll get to Oklahoma here next.
Right.
And then, of course, Texas Tech. I think Kansas State is a good team. 8-4, though, to me. TCU will start the season well, so you're probably going to hear people say, oh, here come the Horned Frogs again. They're going to be like last year's Ole Miss. They're going to start the season well and then fade in the last 5 games or so. I see TCU finishing around 8-4. Maybe 7-5 if they lose one of their first 7 games, but the first 7 games are manageable for TCU. So a 6-1, 7-0 start is very much on the table, but that back half is really difficult. But TCU does have some quality players, so don't overlook the team. Right. I am not suggesting that TCU is falling off the map this year. I just don't like the way the schedule works, and you got to play at K-State, you got to play at Texas Tech, at Oklahoma, and then you get Texas at home, a team that they're probably not beating anyways, regardless of where they play. Again, there's those home and away splits there for you. So I just think TCU, and they got to play. So TCU's first 7 games are manageable, right? The back half at Texas Tech, at Kansas State, at Texas Tech, home against Texas, home against Baylor, at Oklahoma. That's just real difficult. Oh, yeah. So probably a 1-4 stretch there in the last 5 games. Oh, yeah. Maybe 2-3 best case scenario if they don't slip up somewhere else in those first 7 games. So you're probably looking at an 8-4 team if I had to guess. So let's discuss the Sooners, right?
Oh, yeah. Sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I'll let you talk about your Sooners here.
Yeah, so I discussed OU in a previous episode. I think they'll win 9 games in the regular season, potentially go to the Big 12 championship. I believe they will lose to UT, and honestly, I don't think they'll be, quite near where they used to be under Baker Mayfield, under Tyler Murray, and under Lincoln Riley with their head coach. Brent Venables in his second year as head coach, more of a defensive guy, so hopefully that defense will step up. Arguably the best QB room in the nation. with Jackson Arnold from right here in Denton, Texas.
Yeah, that guy's a stud.
Oh yeah, got Dylan Gabriel, who, like, he's a day 3 NFL draft guy, but really they've got General Booty and Arnold behind him, so really just more of a gap here at the quarterback position. Just trying to get through the year, win as many games as possible, but Gabriel's still very good. He I believe he was the quarterback or one of the quarterbacks on the UCF's national championship team all those years ago.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah. And I'm really high on their running backs room.
Oh gosh, yeah, they do have some depth there.
Yeah, and the sneaky guy out of that RB room, Emeka. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, so I won't try right now. But he's a local DFW guy. Went to Timber Creek, but similar to Twin Ewers, supposed to be a 2022 high school grad. But about halfway through his senior football season, he went up to the University of Washington early, dealt with some injuries, so took a red shirt, and transferred to OU. And so hopefully he'll be able to, at the very least, get some playing time. I think he'll be a pretty good player once the top 2 running backs get up out of Norman. So.
Yeah, that running back room for Oklahoma is really good, and I love the starting offensive line. Actually, they did pretty good in the portal. I do worry about the depth. So if a couple of injuries occur up front for Oklahoma, I have my doubts. But if they can stay healthy, I do like this position group a lot. I guess that's kind of the caveat for a lot of teams is that the first to the second string they drop off sometimes.
Yeah, just don't get injured.
Yeah, just don't get injured. That's all you gotta do in football. Just don't get injured.
Yeah,
easy, right?
Oh, yeah. ACLs are a government myth to sell more ACL surgeries.
So, we got Texas and Oklahoma obviously going to the SEC next year. It kind of feels like it's meant to be where they kind of meet up for the conference championship for this last year. If it's not one of those two, I think Tech will find a way to slide in there. By the way, I was talking about that Tech defense. Their offense is also really good. Got Tyler Shuck coming back at quarterback. Sorry. Sure. I'll talk about the Red Raiders for like 20 more seconds. Tyler Shuck's back at quarterback. He's 8-1 as a starter. The caveat with him is, can he stay healthy? If he does,
you can shuck up a defense pretty good.
Oh gosh, that's right. Yeah, oh my God. What the shuck's going on out here? Yeah, the receiving core is really good for Tech too. They're all seniors. Shuck's a senior. The running back's a senior. The offensive line has a bunch of seniors. The interior of the offensive line for Texas Tech, I really like. I don't like the offensive tackles, so we'll see if they can maybe smoke and mirror their way through the season there. But I like the interior of the offensive line. We'll see if the tackles can improve. But yeah, I like Tech from top to bottom this year. And I like their schedule too because they get TCU and Kansas State in Lubbock. And I think that's going to matter by the end of things.
Yeah, and that crowd's going to be a big factor because there is literally nothing to do in Lubbock.
And they're going to have about 4,000 less fans this year because of the construction at Jones AT&T Stadium. We got AT&T Stadium here in Arlington, and then Jones AT&T Stadium in Lubbock.
Shout out my guy Jerry.
I think, and then Tech gets Oregon at home in the second week of the year. I'm serious. I know a lot of people are not going to agree on this take. I think Texas Tech's going to beat Oregon in week 2. I actually think that. Yeah, I like the way their defense line matches up against Oregon's new look offensive line. Sometimes, just because you have a new look offensive line doesn't mean it's going to be bad. That's not where I'm getting at. But if you have a position group that has to replace a ton of guys from the previous year, typically, if it normally regresses, and if they got to work through the kinks, you're going to be working through those kinks early in the season. Well, Tech gets them at home against what I think will be that breakthrough defensive line in the pass rush early in the season. If they were playing in November, maybe I'd think differently, but it's in September. Again, the schedule is what decides the outcome a lot for college football teams. And I think Tech's a legit team this year. I think the market is underselling this team because of the injury situation last year with Tyler Shuck. I think this team is going to break through this year. Watch out for the Red Raiders. I think the writing's kind of on the wall, with the Mike Leach situation there. You got a super senior team and the coaching staff. Here, you want some other fall camp intel here for the Red Raiders? The coaching staff for the Red Raiders feels like they are 14 points better than what they were last year.
Yeah.
So if you have people who are selling the Red Raiders this year, they are going to have this one argument. This is more of 20 seconds. I said earlier I was going to talk like 20 seconds more on the Red Raiders. This is more than 20 seconds.
He's got the Raider rash.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Here's Daddy Adam with another dad joke. All right, so one last thing about the Red Raiders. For the people who are selling this team, they're going to give one argument and one really argument only. Well, I guess the Tyler Shuck injury thing. He has been injury prone, so that's one. But the second thing and the biggest thing they're going to mention, Texas Tech was 4-0 in one-score games last year, including 3 overtime victories. Here's my argument to that and the Texas Tech over. Texas Tech may not be that good in one-score games this year. You know, maybe the roles switch and they're like 1-3 in one-score games this year. Right. Here's the thing: they're a better team than what they were last year, significantly better in my opinion, and so their point per game differential. Here we go with another point per game differential here. I think that point per game differential last year, which was less than 1 last year per conference game last year, Texas Tech was like 0.6 something. Okay, so I think that is going to improve, right? So this is a better team. They may not have the one-score fortune, the one-score game luck, but this is a much better team. So they're not going to have that 13-point loss on the road or something, you know. And they get the majority of their tougher teams at home. And I think those teams that they play at home, like Oregon, TCU, Kansas State, are all regressing this year. So in Texas Tech, I don't know if they're 14 points better than last year, but I definitely think they're several points better at least.
Right.
This is a team to watch for this year. Betting advice, take the over for Tech. I think this is at the very worst, and I mean the very worst, 8-4. And by the way, if Tyler Shuck does get injured, here's another argument here against the devil's advocate here. If Tyler Shuck does get injured, they got a guy in Morton at the back at quarterback who got a lot of experience last year because of Shuck's injuries. And with that senior-laden receiving core, and at the very least a senior-laden offensive line with a really good interior, with a very good interior of the offensive line, I think they are set well here, for injuries, just in case. So, yeah, take the over for Tech. So, with Oklahoma here, I love Oklahoma's schedule. 2 teams that have had Oklahoma's number in the Big 12 lately, Kansas State and Baylor. They avoid both of those teams. They also avoid Texas Tech. And they get the majority of their most difficult opponents in Norman.
And pretty much all the new Big 12 faces, who, in my opinion, aren't, at least for football, aren't going to be that good this year.
Yeah, I think UCF will be the best of them. And then, guess what? Oklahoma gets UCF in Norman this year. Off a bye week, too.
You're right.
So, it's kind of hard for me to sit here and look at Oklahoma's schedule and not say that this team's going to at the very least, go 9-3.
Right. They finished with 6 wins, like the season right after, losing your head coach, really your entire roster and coaching staff to the portal, and a bunch of high school commits decommitted because Lincoln Riley left. So, that gave Venables a bit of a better chance having, a full off season, full year of recruiting to, rebuild his team. So they're definitely going to be top 3. I think top 2 in the Big 12.
Probably so. Yeah. I think there's a for sure top 3 in the Big 12. I think it's Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech. I think there's a little bit of a drop off there. And 4th, Kansas State, I would say, because they play TCU at home and away split there. I think it matters. I would put TCU 5th. I still think they got a lot of good players. I think TCU can still be a quality team this year. I just don't like the way the schedule breaks for them. And they still have some new players. I don't like the wide receivers for TCU as much this year. I worry about the interior of the offensive line and the pass rush defensively. Outside of that, though, I like what they got a lot. They're going to start off well, so you're probably going to hear a lot of people, everyone thought TCU was going to regress this year. Give it time, like Ole Miss last year. Give it time. They will. So here's my argument with Oklahoma playing for the Big 12 championship. Not argument against, argument for.
Right.
I mentioned that schedule, right? They avoid K-State. They avoid Texas Tech. They avoid Baylor. They get UCF and TCU and all at home. Man, this is just It's a hard team not to like this year with their schedule. Okay, so last year Oklahoma went 6-7.
Yeah.
5 of those 7 losses were by 1 score.
Right, and then you had the UT loss by 49, which
When you didn't have Dylan Gabriel.
right, or really any quarterback.
Yes, it's so true. It's a huge drop off, and it won't be that much of a drop off now with Jackson Arnold as the second string. Arnold will be the second string. Journal will be the third.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to spank the booties there, but yeah, he's third string this year.
Salute the general.
Yeah. Oklahoma to me is most likely a 10-2 team. Slight chance of 9-3 if they disappoint again. I still have questions about the defense. I think they're going to be able to create havoc this year. I like the defensive ends. I like the linebackers for the most part, and I like the safeties. I don't like the defense up the middle as much. Linebackers, if they can stay healthy, I like. I do not like the defensive tackles. This is an undersized defensive line, and I don't love the corners either. The thing is, though, there's not a ton of teams outside of Texas who you look at the schedule and say, well, they're just going to outclass Oklahoma this year, right? I don't love Oklahoma's roster as much.
Yeah.
It's not like significant downgrade for me. It's still Oklahoma. It's still really good. It's really mostly to do with their schedule. So, if you were to look at potential 10-win teams or double-digit win teams at the end of the year, Oklahoma could be a hollow, if you will, double-digit win team, but I think they have a path for the Big 12 championship. And again, it would be very, what's the term I'm looking for? It'd be appropriate for a Texas and Oklahoma Big 12 championship this year. If it's not one of those two, if it's not one of those two that ends up, if both of them do not end up going to Arlington, I think Texas Tech is the team to watch for. Kansas State, so I haven't really discussed much of them other than saying I think they're a quality 8-4 team. Look, man, I've got my questions on K-State this year. The offensive line returns 5 starters. They got a really good offensive guard in BB, but outside of that, I don't think the offensive line is like super good. I think it's pretty good. They'll certainly rely on it this year. Howard, I think he is what he is at quarterback. The receivers this year are going to take a step back. The tight ends will be effective this year. The running back room, I like that. The guy they got from Florida State, I think he'll be good this year. But outside, look, and not having Deuce Vaughn's going to be killer, needless to say, right? But
He also played basketball for them, starting point guard last year.
So, the thing with me with K-State, a good team, well-coached team that got what it takes to be good. Maybe, well, I don't think they're going to be really good this year. I think good, pretty good. I don't see the stars as much this year. Like last year, they had some really good individual players. I don't see that this year. Right. And then they got to go to Lubbock. They got to go to Columbia to face Missouri, a team that I discussed earlier on the show. They got to go to Austin to face the Longhorns. I see those as 3 losses. And that's if they don't lose to TCU. Right. It's if they don't lose maybe another game in there. They got to go to Kansas, who will have a really good offense this year, although I don't think their defense will be that good. But they just got some tricky road games in there. Well, they got some real difficult road games, and then they got some trickier games in there, like the Kansas TCU games. Right. I think Kansas State's an 8-4 team this year. I don't know about 7-5. I think they're better than that. Right. But I don't see 9-3 either. They were 9-3 last year in the regular season. Right. I don't think they're as good as last year, and I think the schedule is a little bit more difficult. They played some of the better teams at home last year, so I see this team again as 8-4, a good 8-4 team who might finish in the top 25, maybe, depending on their quality of wins there. But I don't like seeing dark horse Big 12 title stuff here. Both K-State and TCU will regress this year. TCU more so in their win total than K-State. Right. K-State more so from a power rating standpoint. But yeah, I'm not selling K-State. Right. I'm just not buying K-State. TCU, I'm kind of with the market on them. Kind of between 7 and 8 wins most likely. Probably 8 because of the way that first half of the schedule benefits them. Right. I haven't really discussed much of the Big Ten outside of the top teams. Right. I'm going to tell you this right now. Michigan State's not making a bowl game this year.
Oh yeah.
Take the under on Michigan State. You can get it at minus money, not plus money, but minus money at 5.5. They're not getting the 6 wins. They've got 6, in my opinion, sure thing losses. They play Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, at Iowa, and at Minnesota. Those are 6 losses right now. Those are 6 losses right there, and they're not going to go 6-0 in another 6 games. So I think Maryland will go into East Lansing and beat them early in the season as well. So I think the most likely scenario is actually 4-8 from Michigan State. If they can smoke and mirror their way maybe to 5 wins, they won't get to 6 though.
Oh yeah. I mean, I know you were on the Purdue bandwagon for a couple years.
Last year, only last year. I love the way their schedule benefited them. Purdue's, I don't think they're going to make a bowl game this year.
Don't you dare say that.
I'm sorry, I don't see it with Purdue this year. They're going to be the Purdon'ts this year. Last year, for those of you who followed me on my page, you know I was very high with my Purdue'ings.
Yeah.
Last year, as I called them, I thought they could play for the Big Ten championship. Not win it, but I thought they had the path to get there and a decent enough roster. I thought they had some undervalued talent, and they did. They got there. That path really set them up well last year.
Yeah.
That path does not exist this year for the Boilermakers. They went from having arguably the easiest schedule in the Big Ten to having the most difficult in the Big Ten, despite playing in the Big Ten West.
Right.
So how does that occur? If you're a Big Ten West team and have the most difficult schedule in the Big Ten, here's your answer. You play Michigan and Ohio State, your crossover slate, and that's what Purdue has this year. If I had to predict a record for Purdue, I would say 5-7. I think 4-8 is also on the table. If the Big Ten West is just filled with a bunch of below-average teams this year, maybe Wisconsin doesn't pan out in their first year under Luke Fickell, maybe 6-6 as a slight chance, but this team is definitely going to regress this year.
Right.
And again, I really doubt they get to a bowl game. 5-7 is my prediction. I could see 4-8 as well. You can also get Purdue at 5.5 at some sports books if you're into sports betting. I don't think that's the best bet. I think the best under bet in the country is the UAB under, as I discussed, like the first one here on the show. I think the next best under bet is Michigan State. And then I think that after that, the next best under bet would be Florida because of their difficult schedule. But the over bets would be Texas Tech, UTSA over 7.5. I know UNT fans are going to want to hear that. That's why I saved that for last. So I'll briefly discuss that. UTSA, it kind of has like a one last ride feel to it.
Right.
The reason why their win total is at 7.5. So yes, y'all did hear that correct. UTSA's sportsbook, their win total at most sportsbooks right now is at 7.5. The reason why that is because of the road schedule. Houston, Tennessee, Florida Atlantic, Tulane, and then UNT. It's a difficult road slate, but I'm telling you, man, they might beat Houston the very first game of the season and hammer this win total, hammer the over here. They may not, and still hammer the over.
Right.
My point here, take the over with UTSA.
Right. And
sorry, go ahead.
My bad. I really like them and Tulane in the American to go to the conference championship.
Same here. Yeah, I think those are the two teams. And I think SMU and Memphis are intriguing teams because of the way their schedules work.
Right.
They have the two most manageable conference schedules in the AAC
Both play
this
in
year.
the UNT, I might add.
UNT's schedule, I would say, is kind of like middle of the pack in respect to their roster.
Right. I mean, we're not going to be great.
Right. But you know what? If you were to look at from how about a win-loss method? Looking at what the opponents you faced this coming season, what they were last year. From that perspective, the win-loss method, yes, our schedule's pretty manageable.
Right.
But from the respect of our own roster, we'll see.
Yeah.
But you know what? When we talked about that schedule earlier for us, I think we can get to a bowl game because of it, right? I don't know, but about breaking through or anything, but I think we can get to a bowl game, which would be successful with the first-year coaching staff, and you lose some quality players in the portal, and your first year in the American, no less. So I would consider that a success.
Oh, yeah.
We're probably looking at a record of either 5-7 or 6-6, if I had to guess.
Oh, yeah.
But if some teams bottom out, maybe we go 7-5 best case. But I don't see anything other than that. I don't see anything like truly special.
Yeah. I feel like we're playing Navy just early enough to where, like, if they have any early season struggles, they still might be going through those at that point.
Sure. I'd love to get Navy at home, but yeah. But you mentioned a good point there. So, if a couple of teams, maybe like a Navy, maybe a Temple, UAB, they bottom out this year, maybe we can finish 7-5, but I think 6-6 is the most likely scenario, with a scenario where we bottom out and go 5-7. But the non-conference will help us get a couple, maybe a few wins. So I was discussing the over bets, right? Here is the biggest potential breakthrough G5 team this year that I would watch out for. South Alabama.
USA.
Yeah. Man, I think this team is the best over bet in the G5, if not UTSA, South Alabama. Their win total is also at 7.5. This was a team that won 10 games, 10 regular season games last year. The reason why their win total is at 7.5, it's not because of their returning production. It's not because of the TARP that I discussed earlier. No, this team returns top 10 returning production. So you're probably thinking, why in the heck is their win total at 7.5 and not something like 8.5 or 8 even? The reason why it's like UTSA, it's because of their road schedule. The 4 toughest teams they have to face are all on the road this year, including 2 in the non-conference against Tulane the very first week of the year, Oklahoma State from the Big 12, and I'm not sure about Oklahoma State this year. They got to face Troy on the road as well as James Madison on the road. Right. So that there's a reason why the sports books have their win total projected right now at 7.5. There's some other sports books though that currently have their number at 8 or 8.5. So I suggest hammer that 7.5. It is heavily juiced to the over, so you're taking a little bit of a risk there, but I think it's worth it. Right. I think this team is very much worth on putting a bet on, and I'll tell you why. Just in case their quarterback, who's going to be Carter Bradley this year, the starting quarterback, underrated quarterback to watch for in the G5 this year. Even if he gets hurt, they've got a backup quarterback, Desmond Trotter, I believe is his name, who used to be the starter, and he's another senior. This is it's not a super senior team, but they got a lot of seniors on the team. A lot of experience, again, top 10 in returning production. You watch them beat either Tulane or Oklahoma State. Right. You watch them. They're going to make themselves known in the first month of the year, in the first few games in the non-conference there against Tulane and against Oklahoma State. Again, both of those games are on the road, but watch out for the Jaguars of South Alabama this year. Again, I would suggest if you want to win some money this year, take the over 7.5. You can find that in some sports books for the Jaguars. All right, let's discuss one last over bet, and then we'll kind of finish up the podcast here because I know we've been going for a couple of hours now. So, I briefly discussed earlier Oregon State.
Ah, yes. The damn good team.
Yes. We all need to be Oregon State fans this year. Not just me, not just Adam O'Day here, apparently, with some of the puns he's using. We all need to be Oregon State fans. I think they've got a very manageable path this year to potentially start 9-1, if not 10-0. At the very least, like worst case scenario, 8-2. Right. But very likely 9-1, and again, ceiling scenario, 10-0. I'll get to that in a second, but Adam, give me your thoughts on the Beavers.
No, I think they'll be very good. I've used damn good a few times already.
That's damn okay with me.
DJ Uiagalelei transferring it in from Clemson. I feel like Dabo Swinney did an okay job with him, but I mean he's got 2-3 years of experience there, so I feel like he'll be ready to take that next step in his production and just lead this Beaver team to 11 win year at the very least.
Okay, so when you say 11 wins, are you including postseason play there potentially?
Oh yeah, I mean I think 11 wins very easily could be in the regular season, but for sure if you count postseason.
So I've been doing these preseason analysis now for this will be my 6th year, and the most manageable Power 5 schedule that I've ever seen was, I guess, in relative respect to the team's rosters, right, was Minnesota back in 2019. I thought they could start that season 8-0 and have a chance of beating Penn State with the momentum building. They got them at home. And what happened? They beat Penn State. They got a lot of momentum, and they were that year's biggest breakthrough team, arguably, maybe outside of, LSU, obviously, was elite that year. Yes, they broke through, but LSU was already really good the year before, right? Minnesota came out of nowhere for a lot of people. But for me, I totally expected that, actually. Earlier in the show, we were talking about how schedules matter for teams and how some teams' records are not as really indicative of how good or bad they are. And I mentioned 2019 Minnesota. It's because of that schedule they had that year. Well, while I don't think Oregon State's schedule is as manageable as what Minnesota had in 2019, I think it's the most similar type of schedule in terms of momentum building kind of schedule that I've seen since then. So here's what I mean. The way Minnesota matched up against those first 8 opponents that they had in 2019 was very favorable. They played a lot of teams that had either like 1 or 2 position groups that were just going to be down that year, or they were just in a total transition, or like they were like low in returning production, low in TARP. So again, TARP is like the quality from recruiting, returning production, and then the transfer portal. Okay. So if your TARP is low, then yikes. But so Minnesota played a lot of teams that would have been low in TARP if TARP existed back then. But this year, Oregon State plays some teams that I think are low in TARP. So let's discuss the non-conference. The first 3 games of the year, they should be 3-0. At San Jose State, home against UC Davis, and home against San Diego State. So for those of you devil's advocates, I'm sure you're thinking, right? We're kind of trained to think in terms of devil's advocates now, right? With everything going on today. So for you devil's advocates who are saying, well, isn't San Jose State like pretty good? Like, don't they have a good quarterback? For you who pay attention to college football in depth like that, and like, isn't San Diego State usually pretty good? Yes, not as much this year. San Diego State's kind of in a rebuild this year. I'm kind of not fading San Diego State. I'm selling San Diego State more so. I'm not a believer in Brady Hoke, nor am I a believer in their roster for this year. And they've got question marks in their front 7. The reason why I point that out, San Jose State has a lot of questions on their defensive line. They're very undersized. San Jose State was sneakily good on their defensive line these last couple of years. They lose everybody up front. Right. The reason why I'm pointing this out specifically about these opposing teams' defensive fronts is because Oregon State has potentially the most overlooked position group in the country, and that is their offensive line. I think they've got 4 guys who will be drafted next April, and they've got 7 to 8 guys who they're really high-quality guys. They got depth, and they got talent, and most importantly, they have the chemistry and the experience together. Right. They are going to run the football a ton this year, and they've got a running back who I think has an outside chance of having a 1,000-yard season. So if you want to have like outside odds, maybe plus odds there, bet a little bit to win a lot of a running back who can eclipse 1,000 yards this year. Bet on Damian Martinez for Oregon State. A lot of it has to do with his talent, his upside. He'll be a sophomore this coming year. He was great as a freshman. He almost hit 1,000 yards last year. He's being overlooked. The offensive line's another reason, and because of their opponents. And something else to keep in mind for this year for Oregon State. So after those first 3 non-conference opponents, they'll face Washington State on the road. So it's not going to be easy. But guess what Washington State's biggest question mark is? Their defensive front 7. And then they play Utah at home. Now, that's not a question for Utah. They're always good up front. But remember what could be an issue for Utah this year, especially early on in the year. Cam Rising's health status. And Oregon State gets Utah at home. More on Oregon State's home games here in a second. Then they go on the road to face Cal. Guess what Cal struggled with last year? Stopping the run. Then you get UCLA at home, who has a lot to replace last year with Dorian Thompson-Robinson and some other offensive stars. Again, you get UCLA at home. Then they get a bye week. Then you're at Arizona. Guess what Arizona's biggest question mark is?
Everything.
Defensively, everything. But specifically, their defensive line, their front 7. Then you go on the road to face Colorado. Guess what Colorado's biggest question mark is? Line of scrimmage, defensive line, front 7.
Well, winning games in general.
Winning games in general, right. But their biggest question mark is their depth on their offense and defensive lines. But it's a lot to do with just the line of scrimmage play. Oregon State's strengths on both offensive and defensively, line of scrimmage. And then you play Stanford at home. Stanford's just not going to be very good at all, right. So it doesn't matter. It's like another bye week there. But guess what Stanford's biggest issue is going to be this year? Well, everything, but line of scrimmage. And then you get then Oregon State gets Washington at home. And you get Stanford right before that. That's like a bye week. Right. And then you get Oregon on the road to finish off the season. So you notice how I discussed earlier, before I went in depth here about Oregon State's schedule. I talked about Minnesota, right, in 2019. They had the kind of schedule where they matched up against their opponent favorably, and they could build that momentum. That's the kind of schedule Oregon State has. Something else. Like I said several seconds ago, there's 2 things I want to also mention about this schedule. 1, Oregon State's home games. Oregon State in 12 of their last 13, they've won 12 of their last 13 home games. They've covered in their last 13 home games. Reser Stadium, their stadium name, is getting renovated this year. They're going to have an increased amount of people there. So it's going to be even more electric than what it has been in the past. And kind of like UTSA with one last ride, this is kind of Oregon State's one last ride, right? With the way the Pac-12 is looking right now. Right. They've got a lot of upperclassmen experience, had a lot of guys decide to come back for one more year after a quiet 10-win season last year. Right. And those home games, of those games that I mentioned to you, the four most difficult, whatever order you want to put them, Washington, Oregon, Utah, and UCLA, right? Three of them are at home. And again, I mentioned how much success Oregon State's had at home, and their stadium's going to even be rocking more this year. So, and then the last thing, remember we're going to have the running clock rule this year in college football. It's going to be just like the NFL, where the only time the clock stops, after a first down, whatnot, are in the last 2 minutes of each half. Well, guess what teams are going to benefit from that? The teams who run the football the best and play that time of possession. That's Oregon State. And as I mentioned, those opponents, the way they match up, they can build some momentum and potentially overachieve because of the way that schedule works out for them. So, when I bet the over on Oregon State way back in May, it was at 8 even. Not too long after I bet the over, that number went to 8.5. So, you're going to now need 9 wins, right, for that? Book it. I think Oregon State's winning at least 9 regular season games this year and challenging potentially for 10. Best case scenario, I think 11. Keep in mind, though, remember, the most challenging game there is probably the road game against the Ducks, who they beat last year. So trust me, Oregon has not forgotten about that game. Got to go to Eugene now. But remember something else. Oregon, they allowed over 240 rushing yards against Oregon State last year. Oregon State ran the ball 19 straight times in that comeback win. So when Oregon State had that comeback win against the Ducks last year, one might think, maybe they had to change things up and go to the passing game. No, they ran the ball right up Oregon's throat. And with the way Oregon State's coaching staff matches up against a lot of new coordinators for Oregon this year, not a new head coach, just a lot of new coordinators and a defense that's going to be relying on a ton of transfers. Right now, Oregon, if you look at futures, Oregon's a 7.5-point home favorite against the Beavers. Take Oregon State plus the points there. I think you can bet some early money there because I think that spread will change as we get closer to that game based on how Oregon State's schedule works out for them and how the market will be adjusting, I think, to the Beavers. Take the over on Oregon State at 8.5. That's my last over bet here. One of my favorite over bets of the year. I watch out for the Beavers this year, man. I think they can be one of the biggest breakthrough teams this year.
Well, leave it to Beaver to have a great year.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's all we had for this episode. A little bit longer, just a little bit than my average.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good.
We just gave a whole entire college football preview for this year.
Oh yeah. Hey, if the viewers don't like it, well, too bad. You can take your business elsewhere, but please don't.
I'm trying to think. So we talked about the SEC. We talked about the Pac-12. We talked about the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12.
The American.
We talked a little bit, about the American.
And the USA, South Alabama.
Yeah, we talked about South Alabama. I guess one other team to watch out for this year to kind of hit their over bet. So actually, I guess I have one other over bet. So let's just discuss real quick the Mountain West. We haven't really talked about the Mountain West this year. So one other over bet. It's currently placed, this team's win total is at 4.5. It's shaded to the over, so it's minus money. I think it's worth it. That's Colorado State.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of out of nowhere here. I think this team is going to have one of the top 3 defenses in the Mountain West this year. I like the way their schedule kind of works out for them. They get their 3 most difficult Mountain West opponents all at home, including Air Force and Boise. In the Mountain West, for those of you who may not pay attention a lot to the Mountain West or G5 football, the Mountain West just graded out as the worst it has ever graded out as for one season in its 25-year history last year. Which means, there's not as much top-heavy teams, right? Boise State's not quite as strong this year. The defense is going to be a little questionable for Boise this year, at least more questionable than it normally is. They lose a lot of experience, and the talent, the TARP, right? The talent incoming is not, I think it's a little bit of a drop-off. And they have to go to Colorado State. Colorado State, watch out for their quarterback, Clay Millen. Now, last year, Clay had the highest completion percentage in the country despite playing behind the worst offensive line in the country. That offensive line, it's going to be a brand new look offensive line this year. So, addition by subtraction.
All right.
So,
Quick maths.
Yeah, quick maths, right? Addition by subtraction, they return their best guy in their center. That's a good starting point. The offensive line literally can't get worse. I don't know how much improved it'll be. It'll be improved, right? We talk about that low bar to clear. It has that low bar to clear. But because Clay Millen, as a freshman and a first-year coaching staff with a young receiving core, did that well last year behind that offensive line, with what should be an improved offensive line, a receiving core that returns their best in Torrey Horton. He's a senior. He's the one upperclassman they got this year in the receiving core. Watch out for Torrey Horton. He had over 1,000 yards receiving last year. I think he'll challenge for that again this year. You got Clay coming back, who's going to have that freshman to sophomore leap. You got an offensive line who should take multiple steps with improvement. And then one of the top defenses in the Mountain West with a schedule that I think works out in their way. With, again, a kind of a down Mountain West right now. Take the over for Colorado State at 4.5. I don't think you will regret that at all. So for those of y'all listening, let's discuss those win total bets one last time, and then we'll end this episode here. I know we've been going a little long here. So once again, those win total bets are Oregon State over 8.5. You could have gotten that at 8 a few months ago. It's now at 8.5. It's shaded to the under, so you can get at plus money there. Colorado State, it's shaded to the over, so it's minus money, but I think it's worth it. And then UTSA and South Alabama over 7.5. Both of those are shaded to the over. They're both heavily juiced. I think it's worth it. Can have a little bit more breathing room there with the win totals, with the half wins. And then the unders. Let's look at 2 here. Let's look at Michigan State under 5.5 and UAB under 5, or at plus money if you want it at under 4.5, which I think is also a good bet. So if you prefer the plus money, I completely understand that. So, yep, those are my most confident win total bets this year. Oh, yeah, and then the Texas Tech over 7.5.
Thumbs up.
Yep, I really like Texas Tech and Oregon State at the Power 5, and Colorado State, South Alabama, and UTSA from the G5. And then I would totally fade UAB this year. And then I think Michigan State is not going to get to a bowl game, so I think they're going to finish under 5.5 on that win total. So, yeah, it's minus money, though, on Michigan State. I still think it's worth it. So those are my favorite win total bets, most confident.
All right. Well, there you have it. Easy financial advice from the encyclopedia. Thank you all for tuning in. If you made it this far, you're a real one. And
No
now see you in my next episode.